Hello, everyone, and welcome to Open Door Philosophy. I am Taylor Jones.
Oh, and I'm Derek Parsons.
And I am Clarence, aka Andrew.
All right. Welcome to episode 78 of Open Door Philosophy, where we are going to discuss part 2 of The Women Who Shaped Philosophy. But first, how are you guys?
I'm so good. I'm sitting here. I got my Waterloo orange vanilla sparkling water can, and it's Monday evening, and I'm really tired. So anyway, I'm doing fine. How are you guys? Andrew, let's say Andrew. How are you, Andrew?
I am doing good. I'm just not doing too much, actually. Yeah. It's always fun to record after a long day because I feel like we just don't,
We just don't care.
We don't care. Yeah. So,
Yeah, unfiltered.
yeah, it's unfiltered. That's a better word to describe it, but all's good. Nothing to complain about. I am extremely hungry.
Okay. Sustenance is important. Taylor, how are you?
True. I am good. I feel like I say this literally every week, but I feel like I just had the busiest week of my whole entire life. So that's how I am. No, I am good, but like just this part of the semester, the thirds are where the humanities classes at Baylor are like pop, 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 and they like beat you up a little bit because they all decide that you should have an exam and or a research paper and or like 5 other things at the same time.
Uh-huh.
But I'm like 5 days out from spring break, so it starts on Friday.
Oh, that's right.
Nice.
You get home early.
That's really great.
So when y'all are listening,
when I say early, earlier than my spring break.
right?
Same.
So as y'all are listening to this, I'm going to be on spring break, which is great. What else? I just started watching Upload. Have y'all seen that? The
No.
TV show. It's
Sounds
a Prime
freaky.
original. It's kind of like The Good Place, but like a little bit less comedic. It's kind of philosophical-ish. It talks about kind of the ramifications of AI. It's where like there's a digital afterlife and you can like upload your conscience.
Sounds like Black Mirror 2.0.
Yeah, I don't like that kind of stuff.
It's not freaky. It's not like dark scary.
Okay.
It's like slightly more serious than The Good Place. So if you like The Good Place, I think it's
All right. There you
nice.
go. Recommendation from Taylor. It has been blindingly beautiful weather the last couple of days.
Yes.
Yeah.
It has been.
So here in Houston, humidity's a thing. This last weekend, there really wasn't very much of it. It was just beautiful, upper 60s, sunny, like sit outside and read a book because it's just gorgeous out.
Yeah. In Waco, it's been like sunny, 75, no humidity. There's been a breeze. It's glorious. And baseball is back.
Oh, spring training
Training has
going on?
started.
That's funny.
Games are happening. They're on TV.
Excellent, excellent.
All is good.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, hey, Andrew, what's something that everyone should sign up for?
Everybody
hard
should
segue
sign
there at all.
up for our favorite brand of Cracker Jacks. Just kidding. They should sign up to our newsletter, which is in the description below. In a similar way and manner to Cracker Jacks, if you open it, you will get a surprise.
Good
And
segue.
so, yeah, see what I did there? Yeah, that's exactly. Yeah, great. And so it's both nutritious. You'll learn a little bit, probably get a little bit smarter, hopefully. And you'll also get a fun little surprise inside as well, which will consist usually, at least for the next few newsletters, of some interviews between all of us. So you'll get to know us a little bit better if that's something you oddly want to do. Kidding.
Yeah.
Yeah, your surprise in the March newsletter is mostly me griping about things. So anyway, look forward to that.
Very nice.
It's going
hilarious.
off on an old man rant. Yes. Okay, very good. Well, hey, man, let's get to this episode. Who are we looking at, Taylor?
So this episode, we're going to be talking about Ban Zhao, who wrote Lessons for Women, and Christine de Pizan, who wrote during the medieval era in Europe about women, and she used like a religious justification for the rights of women. So super interesting stuff.
Awesome. Let's get to it.
All right, let's hop over to the East now. And this goes a little bit back in time. So we are going to hop in our TARDIS, as one of my professors loves to say, and go to the early Han Dynasty, where Ban Zhao was writing. She is said to have been born around like 3032 CE and then lived until about 116 CE. So she had a fairly long life, but this is just a rough approximation. She was one of the first female historians and is regarded as the greatest female scholar in China. She is so cool to me. That's me with like every female thinker. But she grew up, I believe her father was more of like an aristocratic man. Like he had enough money to educate her. So she was able to read and write and think critically about things. And the Emperor of the Eastern Han Empire summoned her to come to the court and give instruction on how women should conduct themselves. I just find that alone so incredible that a woman at this time was revered and valued so much that the highest person in the government, who in Chinese society is regarded as like very close to heaven, close to the divine, would summon this woman to instruct the Chinese women on how to conduct themselves in accordance with culture. It's just so cool to me. One of her big points is that women should be educated so that they can better fulfill their social roles, especially in China. The role that each individual fulfills in society is very, very important. The society will not function if everyone does not play their specific role. I think sometimes this can get a little bit of a negative spin to it, where we think of women as kind of being made small. But from my studies and my understanding, it's not always quite the case. I don't know, that women have a very crucial role to play, even though they're not often like government leaders. They still are kind of the glue of the family, and they perform a very important function. Ban Zhao thought that they weren't able to fulfill that role to the best of their abilities if they weren't educated on why their role was significant. If they didn't know important Chinese texts, they just wouldn't be able to fulfill the role they needed to.
Yeah, let me say something about that if I can. So this is the Han Dynasty, about midway through. Han Dynasty is definitely one of the most prominent dynasties in Chinese history. The dynasty that came before it, the state ideology was legalism, which is very harsh and strict. When the Han Dynasty came along, Confucianism became the philosophy that drove state ideology.
Yeah.
And if you know anything about Confucianism, it is all about social order and roles in society. Yeah, you're right. Here in the West, we kind of bristle at that a little bit. We want to have freedom of choice and all this good stuff. But roles in society and maintaining social harmony was considered the good in Confucian philosophy. And so it's not just Ban Zhao who had this idea that she wanted to, impress upon people about women following their duties or whatever. This was incredibly important to the cohesiveness and the continued flourishing of the Han Dynasty. So nothing to be taken lightly at all.
And you can see, especially through Lessons for Women, that's the text of hers that I have read bits of, but she has other like entire books on the history of the Han Dynasty and other areas. She wrote really prolifically, and I think we seem to have a good chunk of her writings, like a significant amount of her work that's still accessible to people, which I think is so cool. But throughout Lessons for Women, you can see a lot of the Confucian principles and also some of the Taoist principles that we'll talk about. And what I learned recently is that in China, Confucianism, Taoism, and Buddhism are all very intertwined as cultural practices, and that they're viewed as like three knowledge traditions that go together. I believe the word is Sanjiao. I may be pronouncing that wrong, but it's something close to that it's like the three knowledges, and they're not viewed as like, okay, this is Confucianism, this is Taoism, and this is Buddhism. For most of the common people, that they all kind of go together. And you do see bits of that throughout Lessons for Women, that the social hierarchy is very important, and maintaining harmony and right relationships between a woman and her husband, a woman and her husband's family, that proper honor should be given. You should fulfill the duties of your position, but then you also see ideas of the yin and the yang, that women are gentle and soft and the man is strong and the leader, but you need both of them. You need the woman to be gentle and soft, like have those sort of traditional qualities, so that the man can fulfill his role as being the strong leader of the family. So like Mr. Parsons was saying, it's not to be taken lightly that women have a particular role. It's not that they're relegated necessarily to a lesser position, especially in the eyes of like Chinese philosophy. They're both very important. So I think we can just talk about a couple of her ideas and then move to the medieval era. One of her big things is humility that you see interwoven throughout Lessons for Women. She talks about showing humility before others do. That should be the role of the woman. She should be the first to be humble, the first to yield to others, that she shouldn't brag, but she also shouldn't deny her mistake, and that women were really expected to have an upright character and a purity about them. It's almost as if women should be like the first example of these character traits that are very valued, to be soft and to be gentle and to be compassionate and giving, that a woman should really embody these things, and that other people would see her being giving, being yielding, and take after her.
I do think there's an interesting connection here between Confucianism and Taoism and humility. Both of those philosophical traditions value humility greatly. The gentleman, who is the kind of virtuistic ideal in Confucianism, humility is one of his key traits.
Yes.
And the same with Taoism. I mean, you can't accomplish anything if you have a big ego. Humility is key to living that good life. And so we see this also echoed, for women in society as well. From your perspective, Taylor, is this humility that she's talking about? Is this a type of humility that relegates a woman to a man, or is this a type of it's like a type of humility that is supposed to put the woman in a lesser position than, say, men in society? Does that make sense? You kind of see what I'm getting at?
Yeah, I think it does. Like, the implication of it is that women are often in a lesser position, but the way a lot of my professors have taught it is that it's not necessarily viewed that way in Chinese culture, if that makes sense. Like, from the West, we may look at it and put our framework onto it, but being married and having a female partner for men was just as important as it was for a woman to have a husband.
Yeah, would it be like something like, lesser, when we say lesser, a lesser role means lesser for whom? For us looking at it, it's not, it might be lesser, but for them, like, what would the less be in relation to?
I think,
not being able to be like a king or
I'm
something?
not super well versed on like Chinese culture or like the social hierarchy, but women were often not in positions of political power. They fulfilled in a lot of ways what we regard as traditional roles, that they stayed home and they cared for the children and took care of the home. But I don't, very significant.
Which are big roles to do. That's what he's saying, or that's what she's saying, right? Like, these are extremely important.
And when I asked the question, I asked it kind of purposely from a 20th, 21st century perspective, Western perspective, right? That's what we think, for in the West, for the woman should humble herself to the husband. We see that through a lens, whereas in the Confucian conception of it, it is vitally important to maintain social cohesiveness, and maintaining that cohesiveness is the good. So it's interesting to kind of view that from different lenses.
From my understanding, it's like a mutual humility between like that each person should have humility for the other that they're in a relationship with, whether that's in a marriage or with your parents or with government leaders, that like all parties should approach with humility for the role that the other plays.
Oh, submit. That's the word I was looking for. That's from the Bible. It's the famous famous verse about women should submit themselves to their husband. That's what I meant by humbling.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
It would be a similar reflection, right? Because in the next line after says that husbands should submit to their wives too.
I think they do have.
So
if you take the verse in its entirety rather than kind of what Western culture portrays it to be, it's similar. Because in the section on husband and wife, she talks about how the husband represents yang and the wife represents yin, and that unworthy husbands can't control their wives, can't instruct them in a proper way, and wives that don't serve their husbands upset the natural order, so that, like, she's arguing that both parties should be worthy of the role they ought to fulfill.
I was not meaning to cherry pick that verse, by the way.
You're good. Yeah. Kind of on that note, she says that not teaching women ignores that essential relation with men. That if men are taught to be strong and leaders,
that makes sense.
And women aren't taught the gravity of their role, social harmony will be lost because half of your population doesn't understand the significance of their role. And if men don't understand the significance of the role that the woman plays, like, how can they be in right relation with a woman and respect all that she does? So that girls should be taught the same principles as boys. They should all understand the principles of right relationship between, like, with each other. I think that does get to the heart of it. And I know we've been talking about Banzhao for a little bit, and I do want to have time to fully flesh out Piazon. Do y'all have any, like, last questions or comments?
No, I just think it's interesting. Like, but boys are dumb, and present company excluded, of course. But it seems like, from my perspective, if anyone needs the lessons on how to, submit to their wives, it's probably the dumb boys. That's because I have all girls. So.
An interesting way to read Banzhao is, part of what she says is that women and men, like, stay in your own lane. Women have this role, and men should not get in the way of that. The same as women shouldn't get in the way of men's role. That, fulfill your role, fulfill what you ought to do, so that we can keep social harmony rolling right along. And that, like, winning each other's hearts is really important. But you have to be educated to be able to do that. You have to understand what you ought to even be doing in the first place, which I think is cool. And you can read that as, like, men should know what women are doing and understand why that is so important. That if they just went off and were civil servants and worked in the government all day, and they didn't have their wife at home maintaining the like very functioning of the home, rearing the children and cooking and cleaning, then a lot of things would just fall to the wayside. We are on to our last thinker of the episode, Christine de Pizan. She lived in 14th century Europe. She was born in the very early 1300s, and this was the medieval period. A lot of people call it the Dark Ages, but scholars don't love that term because there was still a lot of intellectual growth. There's a lot of beautiful art coming out of this time, and architecture, and just a lot of really cool academic progress being made. This is one of the first times where you see women being educated. And there's other women that I've learned about from this period that I could have picked, but I really like Christine for her City of Ladies book that she writes. But women were active in art, poetry, and like other literary domains, which I think is cool that we're seeing as things start to shift toward the early modern period, that women are beginning to have a more active role. And you see nunneries popping up where the role of women in religion is regarded a little bit more highly. And then there's pushback from that I do want to talk about. one of the big things at this time is the Querelle des Femmes, which is a debate over the superiority or inferiority of women, specifically in regards to Christian doctrine. So you see the differences between Mary, like the Virgin Mary, mother of Jesus, as being really revered for a long time in the Christian tradition. The Catholic Church loves Mary. And then same with the Islamic tradition, really reveres Mary as well. So Mary is very highly valued. And then you have Eve, on the other hand, who a lot of times takes the brunt of the blame for the fall of man, that she was a temptress or, encouraged Adam to abandon his faithfulness to God. So you just see these two ideas cropping up together and people are wrestling with them. And then you get the witch trials in Europe, where if you read the arguments that some of these men made against women, it's so ridiculous that you almost have to laugh before you realize
that's why I'm laughing. It really is. Yeah.
That these people were serious.
Yeah, all the witch hunts. Yeah, and the justification. It's pretty wild. Pretty wild.
It's crazy. So if you're curious, Google the Malleus Maleficarum. We can pop that into the episode notes or the upcoming newsletter, because it's wild. When I read it for the first time, I was like, this man cannot be serious, because some of the things they say are like, women are not human. They're witches or sorceresses. They're sleeping with the devil. Sleeping with the devil? It just is so wild. Like, oh my gosh. So
there's a lot of men, though, in that time who are also supporting women quite a good deal. Like, I forget what his name is. He writes this poem called the Orlando Furioso, which is a poem that says that women have a superior role to men in the time. That's quite famous because they can choose their state in life, and that he is encouraging them that they should be writing about themselves and their own histories, which is quite famous. I think every young Italian would read that in her high school classics course, which is interesting. And the Book of the Courtier, too, which is the most famous book on how a court in medieval times should be run in Italy, talks about, men, they might be stronger and that might allow them to get more political rule in terms of their physicality and such. But he's saying, he talks a lot about how women of this time can also influence politics a great deal, and who, while they are marginalized, they don't have to be, and they can hold great sway and influence. Really cool. So I just want to bring those up too, just to like
intellectual debate that's going on in Europe, that there's people that are like, wait a second, no, women can think. Definitely. And they do have power and their role should be respected. And then there's people that say, no, Definitely. Women aren't even human and they should have no role in anything. And that's the backdrop that Christine de Pizan is writing in, where she creates this treatise from. So she's one of the first professional female writers, and one of her most famous works is the Book of the City of Ladies, which is a philosophical treatise on the goodness of women. And a lot of it is rooted in biblical ideas and Christian teachings, which I think is really interesting. I find the intersection between philosophy and Christianity really fascinating. And it was written directly in response to a work called Lamentations by Matthiolus. And at the opening of this work, Christine reads it. It's not autobiographical, but it's a narrative written from Christine's own perspective, where she's in her study and she has a break. So she's reading this Lamentations and she closes it and she's just in despair. And she cries out, she prays to God, and she's like, how can this be? How can people be saying this about women when in a lot of ways the Bible does not say that? The Bible portrays women positively. And how do you reconcile this? 3 ladies appear to Christine to rescue her from her despair. You get Lady Reason, Lady Righteousness, and Lady Justice, who take her through this kind of mythical journey where they teach her, okay, these things that society says about women are either not true or they're spun in a light that is not fully accurate. to the role that women should fulfill, or like these things that society says is a weakness are not weaknesses at all. One quote that I pulled that I really like, the ladies are a little bit sassy. One of them says, "Those men who are moved by the defect of their own bodies have impotent and deformed limbs, but sharp and malicious minds. They have found no other way to avenge the pain of their impotence, except by attacking women who bring joy to many. Thus, they have thought to divert others away from the pleasure which they cannot personally enjoy." End quote. That's from 1.8.7 in the City of Ladies, which I just... Yeah, I mean, I think that's also something that kind of rings true today, that a lot of women have experienced, that men get angry at the world and then they take it out on women who are just kind of existing. And it's kind of difficult to reconcile for me, like, that it is comforting in a way to see this legacy of women from Platonic times through the medieval period all the way up to today that are sharing in this struggle, or like in this idea of womanhood and femininity, in that like there's community in that it's like I'm part of a legacy of women, but also a little sad that for much of the course of human history, women have struggled in the exact same ways, and that quotes from 1,000 years ago still hold weight, which I just think is really interesting as well.
It is. I'll say it again. Boys are dumb.
Heard it here first, folks.
Boys do good things.
Yes.
A lot of boys are dumb.
Agreed.
Girls do good things, but there are some girls also. It goes both ways. But boys seem to be especially dumb.
Yeah.
Just spend a few minutes in a high school hallway and you'll see what I'm talking about.
Thank you.
Yeah, Andrew's got that experience now.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've heard this past week, I've heard a lot of crazy stuff.
It doesn't stop in college. Oh, goodness. But in this particular passage that I quoted, this section, the lady that's speaking says that this sort of man is corrupt and lacks the virtue and wisdom of an upstanding man. So that type of man attacks women who have more noble conduct and a greater understanding than they do. So this sort of jealousy prompts them to act out. In the context of this work, it's really comforting for Christine to hear, as a woman especially that studied and was a scholar of sorts and an academic and wanting to better herself, that there were men who would lash out because they were upset by her academic abilities, by her intellect. Mm-hmm. And that's just one example. The book is full of them. And then there's a couple other common arguments that de Pisson refutes through the ladies in the book that I want to talk about before we wrap up. One of them is that women are malformed males, which is something that crops up in the Lamentations and the Malleus Maleficarum. And the ladies say that no, God created man and woman. In the Bible, we see that Eve was created very deliberately from Adam's rib to serve a specific purpose. And God would not make a mistake. He would not make humans, like an entire division of people, to be intentionally malformed. That's kind of a ridiculous idea in their eyes. Similarly, the idea that men shouldn't serve women. And the ladies give the example of the bleeding woman and the woman at the well from the Bible, where Jesus comes up to both of these ladies and serves them. And they pull biblical examples throughout the text of well, Jesus was serving people. Jesus was helping women and he was washing their feet and doing all of these things that get associated with the weakness of women. And they're like, no. Why did we get this idea, especially in the church, that women shouldn't hold a role or shouldn't, do this or that, when Jesus said the exact opposite?
Yeah, women play significant roles in Jesus' life.
Yeah. And they say that no one should use serving negatively because Jesus was a servant, which I think is a very powerful argument, especially within this context, that kind of reframing how the Bible has been interpreted to remember what it actually says. And then the last argument that I want to point out is that God just made women to speak, weep, and sew. And the ladies are like, that's kind of ridiculous because none of that should be considered weak. Women are responsible for creating garments to wear, and women are faithful and they're pious. And in the Bible, Jesus weeps. So none of that stuff is actually weak or expressions of women's lower position in society. I think that's one of the big takeaways of Pizon's writing in The City of Ladies, that these things that are associated with femininity and weakness, yes, they can be associated with femininity, but that doesn't mean that they're weak, because women fulfill this role in society because they stay home or because women are emotional, similar to what Banzhao was saying, that, okay, this is the traditional role, but that doesn't mean there's anything wrong with that or that women should be lesser than because they fulfill this role. This role is important socially or religiously or culturally. I think that's a very powerful inversion of how gender roles are typically portrayed.
This is interesting. I mean, I think during this time period, or maybe a little bit after, we start to see like a lot of queens start to emerge. We have, Queen Mary of Scots, and Queen Isabella plays a large hand. And I think even in her own life, one of the patrons of France was a woman, of Catherine. I could be wrong about this. I don't know. I know that a lot of Protestant reformers in their early times, they were very opposed to women being queens. And a lot of these queens were Catholics in Spain, and we had Mary, Queen of Scots, and et cetera, et cetera. And so John Knox, who was this first early
I think that's right,
Protestant reformer, I think he was Calvinist. He was Calvinist, yeah. He wrote this it's a quite famous book in the 1500s called Against the Monstrous Regimen of Woman. And so I think it's just so funny that it's not funny really, but it's just ironic that I don't know what the deal is.
Yeah, fascinating study. If you're talking about monarchs, is Queen Elizabeth of England, an incredibly successful monarch, but boy, did she have to be tough. I mean, the things that she did, she's known as the Virgin Queen. She never took a lover or a husband for that very reason. So it wouldn't get caught up in politics and all that business. And man, she had to be tough, like ruthless.
Yeah, literally.
Yeah.
But we have Queen Mary, who was quite similar, and both of them. I have a preference for one over the other, but
Well, thanks for all that, Taylor. That was a really great overview.
Yeah, this is great, Taylor. Thanks for doing it.
Yeah, I'm going to check out this book of the City of Ladies. That sounds really fascinating.
I can send over
a really interesting commentary on the time.
I can send over the excerpts that I have. I think I have the PDF downloaded.
And she was Italian or French?
French.
French, okay.
She was Italian by birth, though, no? And then she came to France.
I am not sure on that.
Pisano,
Let me see.
Pisa, probably from Venice.
I mean, honestly, it kind of depends on where the border was at that time. It does shift around between Italy and France.
Google says she was an Italian-born French poet and writer.
There you go.
I figured. She's nothing ever good came from France.
Yeah, nothing.
French originally.
Yeah, existentialism. Who's heard of that? Yeah.
That's right. That's exactly right. That proves my point even further.
Yeah. Yeah, my girl's the
Yeah, I stand with
joking.
it.
I love
Before we go down that very deep rabbit hole, let's go over to the book corner, the bookshelf. Yeah, let's go to the bookshelf. Andrew, you're up this week at the book corner. Welcome to the book corner.
I guess it's a little bit less dusty than it was a few weeks ago when we checked it out.
Yeah, it's been some time since we visited it, so now we've had a little spring cleaning.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'm excited to share my first book in a while. Well, I guess we did the book episode, so not that long ago. So I've been reading for the past probably month. Yeah, about a month now. I've been reading Moby Dick, which has been a lifelong dream of mine. There's a few books on my lifelong dream list. Okay, so first one is Moby Dick. Second one is War and Peace. And the final one is Les Miserables. And then the Brothers K was on there too, and Crime and Punishment, but those are off now. So I'm reading Moby Dick right now, which is a beautiful book about this guy named Ishmael who goes on a whaling boat. They chase this white whale named Moby Dick. And it is a long, very difficult book to read, but it's really interesting. It jumps around between perspectives. So sometimes you're Ishmael for the first 200 or so pages, and then it will jump around to like a harpoonist on the boat who's an expert on sails. And then we'll go over the process by which one can extract the blubber from the whales, that they pick up along the way. And then we have a treatise on the different types of whales, the scientific treatises on whales. And then we go to Ishmael, and then we'll even get to the perspective of the whale itself. And so it's just a really innovative, interesting book at that time. That's, I think, all of a discussion of the American experience. There's so many different nationalities of the crew. They come from West Africa and from Europe and from, the Bahamas and from America, of course. There's 30 crew. And at the time the book was written, there was 30 states in the U.S. So I think it's just a really interesting reflection on the American experience and the struggle of being a crew that's all searching for happiness and fulfillment or purpose in life. And is the search successful? The world may never know. Okay, so check out Moby Dick. It's a great book.
That's great. It's got a famous opening line. Do you remember what it is?
Yes. Should I get my sailor's voice on?
Sure.
I don't know if I can do it. Call me Ishmael.
Call me Ishmael. That's right. It's a famous opening line. So I wanted to bring it up because have you ever seen those "Hello, my name is," those stickers?
Yeah.
People will write Ishmael. And no one will get it except the 3 people that's read Moby Dick.
yeah, that's funny.
Yeah, it's a good one.
That's what I'm going to do now at Starbucks because I've been using the Clarence.
Oh, that's right. You can go by Ishmael.
This is a funny story. Yeah, you can totally cut this if you want, but whenever I go and visit another place, I always go to the same coffee shop, and the same people work there every time. I see the same people, and I always tell them my name is Clarence. And so it's not just a podcast thing. So I've committed. But next time I go there, I'm going to say my name's Ishmael.
Ishmael.
Ishmael. One fruit tea for Ishmael.
Mango dragon fruit lemonade.
Oh, that's hilarious. Yeah. That's great. Yeah. I like you originally did Clarence because you thought Andrew was too hard to spell or something.
What?
Yeah.
No. Oh. I thought it would be funny for them to spell Clarence, but on Tony Soprano.
Oh yeah.
Or on The Sopranos, Paulie, who's this weird kind of mean old man, he always tells people that his name is Clarence at the coffee shops that he goes to, and I think it's fun reference.
It is. I said that because I was going to say Ishmael is probably not the easiest name to spell, but.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, probably not. Good luck to my future baristas.
Good luck, baristas. Okay. Let's wrap it up. Right. Oh, I guess I wrap it up, don't I? I start. Okay, everyone. Well, thanks so much for tuning in today. I hope you really enjoyed, and we appreciate you listening.
Let us know your thoughts either at our email at contact@opendoorphilosophy.com or over on Instagram @opendoorphilosophy. Let us know your favorite female philosophers because that's a personal curiosity of mine.
Yeah, make sure you hit the subscribe button on YouTube and slam the subscribe button in our description for the newsletter. Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay.
Slam it.
And follow us on Instagram to stay updated.
I think that's it.
Thank you to Kevin MacLeod for the music that's playing right now and our introduction. And remember, when your life is in need of some philosophy, the door is always open. Bye, guys.
Bye.
Bye.